Hello and welcome to week 2 of your online learning. This week we are going to be looking at microorganisms, and you should be watching this video if you haven't completed up to page 25. If you have completed up to page 25 or beyond, then you should be looking at the next set of core tasks. So go back to the Teams page, have a look at the second set of core tasks, and that's what you should be doing. Anybody else who has not completed up to page 25, this is the video for you. So this week we are going to be looking at what is a microbe or a microorganism. That's same thing, just two different names for the same thing. So a microbe is the same as a microorganism. What is that? What are the three main types of microorganism? What is the process called where useful substances or products are made by yeast or bacteria? And then what are useful substances or products that are made from yeast and bacteria? And by the end of these videos and the exercises that you'll complete this week, you should be able to answer each of those questions. So, microorganisms, what are they? Well, let's have a look at these words. Microorganisms. Micro means small. We've seen part of that word in a microscope. Okay, a microscope is used to look at small things. So micro means small. And you should remember from near the beginning that organisms, that's another word for living things. So microorganisms are small living things. In fact, they're a name given to all organisms that are not visible to the naked eye. So we would need some other way to look at these things, these organisms, because we can't see them just with our naked eye. Now, there are three main types of microorganisms, and you will have heard of some, if not all of these. So number one, we've got bacteria. Number two, we've got viruses. And number three, we've got fungi. And next to those words, you can see we've got three little diagrams. And for those three diagrams, we can see we've got one that looks here a bit like, always described as a bit like a spoon with spider's legs. Okay, and that is a picture of a virus. This one over here that looks a bit similar to some of the cell diagrams we've seen already, that is a fungus. And this one down the bottom looks like it's got a bit of a tail on the end, is a bacterium. Now you'll notice that we have a virus, that's the single term. If we've got more than one virus, it's called viruses. A fungus is a single fungus. If you've got more than one, they're called fungi. And a bacterium is a single bacterium. Bacteria is when you've got more than one. So what I'd like you to do now is to pause the video and fill in these pieces of information on page 18 of your booklet. Now on page 18 of your booklet, there is a slight issue with the printing. So when it comes to labeling your diagrams, you can just write the name next to the picture or underneath the picture because the typing ABC has moved a little bit. Okay, so just write it where it makes sense. You've got 1, 2, 3, and then these three images, you write the names underneath. Once you've done that, you can restart the video. So, looking at each of these in a bit more detail. Now, the first one we wrote down was bacteria. And there are many, many different types of bacteria, and they come in different shapes and sizes. And you can see some examples on the screen. The names of these are given, so certainly if you wanted to go away and Google some of these to find out what they do, you'd be welcome to do that. You may have heard of some of them, so E. coli, salmonella. Salmonella is one that you often find in eggs or uncooked chicken, so you might be familiar with that. Are all bacteria bad? Well, the answer to that question is no. There are actually 10 times more bacteria cells than human cells in the body. And that will make a bit more sense once we've finished our upcoming lessons to show how bacteria multiply. But there are lots and lots of bacteria in our body. They can't all be bad, or we wouldn't be here to tell the story. So you may have heard of Yakult. They always talk about good, friendly bacteria. So that tells you that not all bacteria are bad. And if we look at this little diagram here, you'll see we've got beneficial bacteria. So actually some bacteria are good for us. They help us doing things like aiding with digestion, enhancing our immunity. We've then got what's called opportunistic bacteria. So these are bacteria which, if we're fit and healthy and in normal conditions, they won't do us any harm. We'll be absolutely fine. But if we had a compromised immune system, if our health wasn't as good as it could be, then these bacteria might do us some harm. And then we've got harmful bacteria. These are the bacteria that we do not want to come into contact with. And these are the ones that produce toxins, can cause cancer. That's what carcinogenic substances are. So these should be avoided wherever possible. But you can see they're not all bad. We've also got these beneficial ones and these ones that generally won't do us harm either. What about viruses? You can see here a picture of an actual virus. You can see we've got that sort of spoon-like structure with the spider's legs. Now, these are the smallest of the microbes, so they are smaller than bacteria, they are smaller than fungi. They cannot live without being inside a living cell. And viruses can lead to mild symptoms, or they can lead to very severe illnesses in humans, animals, and plants. And we are all very familiar with COVID-19 at the moment. That is an example of what's called a coronavirus. And that even that one virus in some people leads to no symptoms at all, and in other people can sadly lead to fatalities. So viruses really can affect people in many, many different ways. Fungi is the last microbe that we mentioned. They can be found in a variety of places, in air, in soil, plants, in water. Some can be found on our body. But only about half of all types of fungi are harmful. If you had mushrooms for your lunch today, then that is an example of a fungi, and obviously that is not doing us any harm. So some funguses, okay, mushrooms are an example of a fungus. Some fungi are absolutely fine for us and others really aren't, and you need to know the difference. So that's why if anyone goes picking mushrooms in the woods, you definitely need to know what you're doing. Some of those mushrooms will be delicious and others will put you in hospital or worse. So please be very careful. On the next slide, I have got some images of some different fungi. Some of them are easier to look at than others, so I'm just going to pop them up, and you can always close your eyes and wait for the next slide. So we have some examples here. This is a picture of mushrooms as you would probably think of them, as a fungus. As I said, there's many different types. Some are good for us, some not. They can also look slightly different to what we're used to. Fungus will cause mold to grow on various fruit and vegetables. This is the one that's perhaps not very nice to look at. You can also get toenail fungus. So that is fungi growing on your feet and causing them to not look very nice. Moving on, yeast. Yeast is a type of fungus. Okay, so that last microbe that we were looking at, the last microorganism, and it can be grown in large containers on huge scale. And if yeast is grown without oxygen, then it goes through a process called fermentation. And this process of fermentation makes ethanol, which is a type of alcohol, the type of alcohol that people can drink. And it also produces carbon dioxide. So at this point, I want you to make sure you've got your booklet, turn to page 21 in your booklet, and fill in the gaps with that information. Remember, if you haven't got your booklet, there's an electronic copy online, and you can use that and make notes. Either print out a page from that or just make notes on a piece of paper, okay? Just make sure you store that somewhere where it's not going to get lost. So pause the video now and complete the information on page 21. So your final tasks for this video, I want you to listen to this carefully. So you will need to watch 3 video clips, which are all on the Teams page on the assignment. 2 of them are video clips that are there, they're MP4 files, and one of them is a link to a website. So you have got a video on bacteria, another one on viruses, and a link for killer fungi. So you're going to watch each of those in turn, and for each one, on page 19 of your booklet, you're going to try and write down one piece of information that you've learned from the video. So you can either write it down as you go, or you can watch the whole video and then write it at the end. We want one piece of information about bacteria, one piece of information that you've learned from the virus clip, and one piece of information that you've learned from the killer fungi link. Okay, so that's part 1. You need to do that. You're then going to watch the video on fermentation. So again, that's an MP4 file. And you're going to go to page 21 of your booklet and try to fill that in. Okay. Once you've filled in page 21, you're then looking for part 2 of this video. Okay, don't worry if you forget. I'll mention this again at the beginning of the video part 2. Okay, so you'll be watching 3 videos on bacteria, viruses, and killer fungi. Then trying to fill in page 21 using a video on fermentation, and then watch microorganisms part 2.